fast forward some number of years to being fortunate to have been working with Michael Cole at the Laboratory of Comparative Human Cognition at Rockefeller University during the very early years of the discovery of Vygotsky's work on a more popular basis and bring the publication of Mind and Society, and also some of this very, very interesting work on what we called then the invalidity of cognitive psychology, the ecological invalidity of experimental cognitive psychology. And then being fortunate, again, to find a place where I felt I could teach comfortably, which was Empire State College, which is the non-traditional part of SUNY, where you, at least when I was there, students had individualized mentoring and group studies. You could teach whatever you wanted, whatever the students wanted. There were no grades, but there were written evaluations, and I was able to experiment a fair amount with other ways of teaching while I was there, and to work with working adults who wanted to be in school. You know, not necessarily because they weren't interested in something, but they had gone as far as they could in a career and needed a degree. But they were grown-ups, and it was quite fascinating. So at the same time that I was doing that, I met the people that I work with now in building what we call a development community, a performance community, creating many, many different projects for children, teenagers, adults, in the workplace, at schools, in therapy and after-school programs that are very much influenced by a social, cultural methodology and perspective that stems from Vygotsky, and at the same time is very different from what most people have taken from Vygotsky. And so in a way, the desire to write the book that Karen was referencing, Vygotsky at Work at Play, was to share some of the work that over 30 years has been done with this particular understanding and reading of Vygotsky, and to try myself to understand why I see Vygotsky the way I do, and most other people see him in other ways. Not to say this is the right way at all. I don't think there is one, and I am thrilled at the great diversity and variety of things that people take from Vygotsky's writings and then create other things, whether that's in architecture or science museums or a classroom or the workplace. Because I didn't understand that. I didn't, until I wrote this book, understand why I see so differently. I mean, I probably should have asked other people, and they would have told me right away, but I hadn't asked them. So now that I understand, or at least I have my story of why I see the way I do, now I feel I can challenge people who see differently, because I understand where I'm coming from, and I want to know where they're coming from in their own stories. So how I see him, and this is what I think most people would agree with, is that his mission, his desire, his overriding passion was to create a psychology that did not rule out consciousness and did not subsume consciousness to behavior. He wasn't willing to go on the behavior side or the completely subjective side. He said, no, I need what he was calling a unified psychology. And in laying out that, and how in his attempt to create the beginnings of this psychology that was neither objective or subjective, he had to engage many of the dualisms that were in the mix in this newly emerging fight for what psychology is going to be. And he had obviously engaged them in the language of early 20th century science and early 20th century Marxism. But nevertheless, there's some seeds there that are extremely useful for us in the early 21st century, where modernism and postmodern are living together in some complex way, and where the Marxism that was put into effect in the Soviet Union and other countries is pretty much not a relevant thing anymore, which to me doesn't mean that Marxism isn't relevant. I think it is. But so he engaged these various dualisms, person, environment, biology, culture, thinking, speaking, and another one that has not been given much attention by people, and I think I understand some of the reasons, is cognition and emotion. So I was trying to understand why do so few people who are influenced by Vygotsky or think his work is really good or think he has something revolutionary to say, ignore emotion. Why has he been, I won't say categorized, but why has he influenced cognitive development and learning? And by learning I mean an acquisitional, cognitive kind of learning. Why is that where everyone has gone? And then I realized the question isn't why has everyone gone there. That's obvious. That's what our education system is. That's what psychology is. The question is, why didn't I go there? Sort of turn the tables, like to understand not why doesn't anyone else think how I do, but why is this where I went? And how come I went there is that knowing Vygotsky's work and having worked with Cole and others and really getting a grasp of his, if you will, his dialectical methodology and his understanding of looking at totalities, instruction or learning and development as a totality, thinking and speaking as a totality. And by totality, I mean there's not a causal relationship between those or a transmittal relationship, but they are a unity where one has a particular relationship to the other. For example, learning, needing development. Vygotsky says instruction doesn't just follow developmental level, but it leaps ahead of it and then transforms. I lost my train of thought. So, where was I? What was I going to say?
Why me?
What?
Why do I think this way?
Right, why do I think that way? Thank you.
About emotion.
So, about emotion. Yeah, that's where that's where I was at. And I had been very involved with and fascinated by this form of therapy, which is not very much like therapy, called social therapy, that Fred Newman, a philosopher of science, a community and political activist, was beginning to develop. And then for the past 30 years, I've been working with him and many other people, developing that, and my role in some ways is to try to understand it as well, and in so doing to advance it. So I wanted to know, what does Vygotsky have to say about this? Can I take Vygotsky and what I understand him to be saying and gain some insight into what this social therapeutic process is?